This afternoon I'm going to tell you all about English Christmas puddings, and then I'm going to show you how to make one. So English Christmas pudding is a really fruity, spicy, quite heavy sort of dessert that we Brits eat on Christmas Day after we've already had roast turkey and stuffing and all the rest of the Christmas dinner. So it's quite a heavy dessert, but it is traditional. And it's best if it's made a few weeks before Christmas, because that allows all the lovely spices and fruit to mingle and makes it a really rich flavour. And so, on Stir Up Sunday in England, families gather together, make the Christmas pudding, and when it's all put together, everybody gives it a jolly good stir and makes a wish. And so that's what we're going to do today. So I've got a very long list of ingredients, so I am going to refer to this list because otherwise I might forget something. So first of all, you need to know that this pudding actually gets made over 2 days. On the first day, you assemble all the ingredients and you mix them together. And then on the second day, you put the pudding mixture into a pudding bowl and then you steam it for 8 hours. And yes, I did say 8 hours. So that's literally all day long. It does contain a very long list of ingredients, and as you can see on the table in front of me, we have lots of little pots with all the ingredients because I like to gather them all together to make sure I don't forget something, because if you leave out one of these things, it could be really different, especially if you forgot spice, for example. So we're going to go through all of these. The other thing is my recipe is English, and so that means we don't use cup measures, we use weights. I've converted in the recipe, I've converted the metric weights into ounces, so hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for you. So first of all, you need to find the largest mixing bowl that you've got. You need a really solid spoon. I like this guy, he's my favourite Christmas pudding spoon because he's really sort of solid. And then you gather everything together. And we're going to start off by putting in all the dry ingredients. So the recipe calls for suet. I find it's quite hard to get hold of suet here in the US, so I use butter. And what I do with the butter is I freeze it, and then when it's still frozen, I grate it on a box grater. And actually that's quite easy to do. So I'm going to put that in there. And then the next ingredient is just 2 ounces of flour. And I put half a teaspoon of baking powder into that. Mix that in. I actually find it's quite a good idea to mix the flour into the butter just after I put it in, because that helps the butter stay separate as you add all the other ingredients. The next dry ingredient are the breadcrumbs. So we have 4 ounces of white breadcrumbs. Preferably the bread is a couple of days old, so not the freshest of bread. Tip those in and just keep stirring as you go. And next we add sugar. Now these days I try and cut down on the sugar in most of my recipes, except for Christmas pudding. It's meant to be sweet, and having the sugar is also what helps preserve it for a few weeks before Christmas. So we have a full 8 ounces of dark brown sugar going into that. Again, give this a nice stir to start incorporating all these different dry ingredients. In this little jar, I've already mixed all the different spices together. So in here we have a teaspoonful of mixed spice, and I think you could substitute pumpkin spice. Mixed spice is something that's actually British, and I buy it in Britain when I'm visiting. We also have a 1/4 teaspoon of grated nutmeg, and that's almost a whole nutmeg, and it really makes a difference to grate it fresh. It has much nicer flavour, and then a really good fat pinch of cinnamon. So I'm going to pop that in. Now I think that's all of my dry ingredients, but I'm actually going to check and make sure that I didn't forget anything. No, we're good. All right. So this is really if you like, this is what holds it all together. But the important stuff is all the fruit. And as you can see, I have lots of different types of fruits here. So in England, we traditionally use currants, which would be called Zante currants here in the US. And they're quite common in a lot of baking, more so than here. We've also got sultanas, golden raisins, they're called here, regular raisins. We have chopped, diced, candied peel. This is a mixture of orange and lemon. And of course, it wouldn't be a figgy pudding if it didn't have some figs. So these are chopped, diced figs. We have some chopped almonds here. Don't worry about taking the skins off, you don't need to. And then last of all, and I think this is really important, the zest of 1 orange and 1 lemon. So now I'm going to add all of those different fruits. So, sultanas, raisins, the figs, the currants. Now you're beginning to see why I said you need to get a really big mixing bowl. This is the candied peel, so it's a bit sticky. The nuts. And of course, the nuts actually, you could easily leave those out if you have someone that can't eat nuts in your family. I like to put them in because the texture is different when you get one of the nuts, but it's actually not that essential. So I'm going to give that a good stir. And then the last of the fruit that you put in, and I really like to put chopped, diced, raw cooking apple in, and I leave the skin on. You don't need to bother to peel it, you just need to core it. And that's 1 small apple going in there. All right, so we've nearly got everything in there. We've got most of the important things in there. So now we need some liquid, because as you can see, this is very dry. So we need to put some liquid in. Of course, that butter will melt when we cook it, but at the moment it's still very, very dry. So what we have here are 2 whole eggs and then some alcohol. Now, I actually do think the alcohol makes a big difference in a Christmas pudding. And of course it cooks for such a long time that all the actual alcohol comes off during the cooking. But if you wanted to make it without alcohol, you could substitute fruit juice. Orange juice would probably be the most important. And then we need the alcohol. So we've got, going to have, as you can see, this is black rum. So we're going to have 2 tablespoons of the dark rum. Oops, I think I got a little bit more than a tablespoon in that one. And then the second alcohol we use is stout. In England this would often be Guinness. I happen to have something called Dragon's Milk here, which sounds good for the cause. And we need 2/3 of a cup of the stout. So I'm going to do that now. I always love to see the fizz that you get on the top of it when you put this in. There we go. And now we need to give it all another really good stir. And the mixture needs to sort of have a good dropping consistency when you've got enough liquid in it. So I think that's probably quite good. If it seems a little dry tomorrow when I get ready to cook it, then I'll probably add a little bit more of that stout or some orange juice. So that is how we mix a Christmas pudding. And then tomorrow I'll show you how we cook it. So hello again, day 2 of Christmas pudding, and we're going to take the mixture we made yesterday and we're actually going to cook it today. And I use this glass Pyrex bowl to cook it in. My mother had a lovely pudding basin which was a little deeper and probably better, but this is more easy to come by over here. And we're going to steam this, which actually means you're going to place that glass bowl into a large pan that you can cover. You may even have a proper steamer. I don't, so I use my large pan that I normally use for pasta. And you want something in the bottom to make sure that the glass is not actually touching the metal on the bottom. I don't have a trivet, which is what we would use, but I use 3 equally sized tablespoon measures. They're stainless steel, so nothing really happens to them when you put them in water. And I put the round bits in the middle of the pan, and then I rest the pudding basin on top of that, and that's just enough. It's just like 1/2 inch or so off the bottom, but it stops the pudding basin, the glass of the pudding basin actually touching the metal. So I'm going to put that aside for a moment, because first of all we've actually got to get the pudding into the basin. So here's the wonderful mixture we made yesterday, and it looks perfect. It just falls off the spoon, and it smells wonderful because all the spices and the herbs, and the spices and the sugar is mixed with the fruit overnight, and it tastes good enough to eat already. So, take my bowl and put all of that in there. Sometimes I find the mixture makes more than one full bowl, and when it does that, it's fun because then you can find a little bowl and make a mini pudding. But I think today it's actually going to be a perfect fit. There we go. Looks absolutely perfect. And you want it to be, a Christmas pudding doesn't really rise very much. It rises a little bit, but it doesn't dome in the middle like a cake would. So you actually want to put it pretty much to the top of the pudding basin. And then we want to cover that because we don't actually want the steam to come in contact with the mixture itself. We just want the heat from the steam to cook it. And so you put 2 layers of covering on. The first is a piece of parchment, which I've already cut to be pretty much the right size. And so we pop that straight on top of the pudding and actually push it down so that it touches the pudding mixture. And that's really important. And then you want something that's going to seal it and stop the water getting into the pudding. And I use tin foil. In the old days, I think people used to use cheesecloth. But I use a nice big piece of tin foil, and you'll see that actually it's got a little pleat in the middle. And that is because although the pudding doesn't rise a lot like a cake would, it does expand a bit, and so you want to have a little bit of space for it to come up. So we put that on the top, and make sure that make it big enough that you've got a little bit of room around the edge. And then the next thing we do is we actually take a piece of string and tie that on tightly. It would be easier if I had somebody to help me here. And then I'm the only person other than the dog in the house today. So I'm going to have to use my own finger, but that's okay. But you do want to make sure it gets really tight. So we've got that. Go. And you can see there's quite a bit of foil up, so that will stop the water getting into the pudding itself. And then the next thing is simply to put it in the pan. You want the water to come up about halfway up to the pudding. You don't want it to come up to the bottom of the foil, because if you do that, there's a chance that the water will actually seep inside, and you really don't want to do that. You don't want to boil your pudding, you want to steam it. So I'm going to do that. I have a kettle of water over here that's already hot. Make sure there's oil hot. Make sure the spoons are there. And then we simply put it in there. And And as you can see, I hope you can see, it fits inside completely, so that when I put the lid on here, it'll just gently steam. And we leave that on for 8 hours. I suggest you check it every 2 or 3 hours to make sure that the water hasn't gone down to nothing, because you don't want to burn your pot. And I'll see you again in 8 hours' time. So it's time to make sure that there's still plenty of water. Oh, that was perfect. So now it's time to take a look at the finished pudding. I've waited for the water to cool down so that it's not too hot to take out. And we're going to unwrap this bad boy. And first of all, I'm going to cut off the string so that you can see it. And you remember we put a piece of parchment paper on the top, so let's take that off. And there you can see the pudding in all its gloriousness. And it smells wonderful. So I'm just going to get some paper towel. Just clean that off because it's all a bit greasy around the outside. I don't want to drop it. I'm not sure you can see this, but you can actually see that the pudding has come away slightly from the edge of the bowl, which is a sure sign that it's cooked, just like a regular cake would be. I have a clean piece of parchment to put on top, and some very pretty reusable bees wrap, which I'm going to mold over the top, and then we will simply refrigerate this until Christmas Day. And I hope that if you do make your pudding, you enjoy it as much as I know that we will. So thank you very much, and enjoy making your pudding on Stir Up Sunday.